Don't tell me you're innovative. Tell me how many things you tried and failed, and you sustained this and continued with the same approach. The second thing is, I personally think that innovation is equally about doing new things and also not doing what everyone else does.
Welcome to Kodsnack, Dejan.
Thank you for having me today.
Who are you? What do you do?
So should I start with my education or what I do at the moment?
Yeah, whichever feels natural to you.
I'm a mathematician turned software developer, and then after some 20 years of experience with software development, I turned into this gray area where I'm still coding but without deadline.
Ooh.
Which sounds perfect, and that would be DevRel. Developer relations.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense when you say it, but it sounded really surprising at first.
Yes, at certain points in my career, I was feeling like I'm really saturated with software development, and then it turns out I'm sitting there, starting at 9 a.m. and struggling with myself until the lunch, and after the lunch I give up and I start doing some of coding of my own hobby project. And after 3 hours, I realized, okay, but I'm coding. So this is obviously proof that I'm not saturated. I'm not sick of coding. Yeah. I'm just not feeling well about what I do.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. What led you from mathematics into programming in the first place?
So actually, what I studied at the university, since I'm Eastern European, is so-called informatics.
Oh, yeah. That's what I studied as well.
Oh. I consider this to be mathematics. In this area of world, there's no dedicated computer science faculty or university. So it's always, our profession is kind of orphan. So it's always glued either next to mathematics or electric engineering or organizational sciences or economics, something like that. So it was heavy mathematical computer science. So I don't dare to say this is kind of proper engineering. This is something I grew up into later on in my career.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Like you said, for us, informatics was sorted with like economy and statistics and stuff like that. So it was, my education was very much focused on, information systems in organizations and stuff like that. So correct. Very, very non-mathematical. So it's funny how it gets slotted into different spaces depending on, I guess, circumstances in history or something.
Or you could say some kind of commoditization, because there's a theory that today every organization is kind of software development organization, because inevitably you must digitalize what you do in order to be competitive in the market. And then when you look from like domain-driven design perspective, there's like core domain of what you do and supporting and generic domains, and this theory goes and say, okay, you can purchase generic and supporting domain solutions, but your real core, your real expertise is your core domain, and this is your secret sauce, and you need to develop in-house customized solution for this.
Yeah.
So in the end, it turns out that probably every organization will need to organize software development in-house, bring software developers in-house, and develop product that might be used just internally, but which will support digitalization of what you're already doing.
Yeah. That's. It's sort of one of those things that it feels really. It is really natural, but it's kind of profound as well when it sinks in. That like every organization that does something of value should probably have some people writing unique software for that purpose. Because if that's your special sauce, that's only for you. It shouldn't even be for someone else.
Agreed. And there's one more aspect that says that actually the act of building software is the act of transferring or encapsulating knowledge. And if you start from this perspective, then something like outsourcing is not making too much of a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the area of the world where I do live, like 80 to 90% of developers are working in outsourcing companies. So they lease whole teams which develop and deliver and walk away. So I'm quite I would be quite interested in going to these organizations and witnessing firsthand what happens when someone outside of your organization encapsulates your knowledge and returns it back to you.
Yeah, that's a really strange translation process.
Yeah, because when you think, and if I now go and ask you what we software developers do, you would probably tell me, okay, we are building and delivering software. But actually then when you start thinking a bit more about it, you will see that, let's say, typical good software product or project is long-lasting. So it could be lasting 5 or 10 years, supporting this internal operations of the company. And then, okay, we build it in 1 year, and then we exploit it for 9 more years, which in total is 10 years. So just one out of these 10 years we were building it, for 9 more years, or to express this in percentages, 90% of the remaining time of the life cycle of the product, we were actually maintaining it, evolving it, changing it. So actually what we do, I think, 90% of the time, or maybe it's like 75%, it doesn't matter, but majority of the time, what we do, we are changing things, maintaining, evolving them to accommodate what business is requesting from us.
Yeah, absolutely. I work at the product company, so that's definitely true for us. We have, I think the oldest code with, an auto-generated date header in it is from 2005 or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely true. It's strange to think about, encapsulating knowledge as well, because so much of the code, this might be a personal failure of mine, but a lot of the code I write, it represents knowledge, but it doesn't really encapsulate it, because I often find myself looking at my code and saying, this does this, that's intentional. Why does it do that? I didn't put in something that actually captures that knowledge, the stuff that caused me to write this code.
This is not you anymore, in other words. But look, encapsulation of knowledge is some kind of noble goal, but it's never reached fully, because if you think about it, if we were able to encapsulate knowledge about the domain 100%, then it would be possible to take a product and replace whole team, and completely new team would be able to continue maintaining and building this permanently. Yeah. And this is definitely not possible. So this is empirical evidence that only part of the knowledge or organizational cultures is encapsulated within the software. Yeah. And the better part of it lives in a team. And probably because of this, culture is so important, but people are not aware of it.
Yeah. And it probably enables better code in some instances as well. I feel like we have many cases where the model or the knowledge is much more complex, but once you've taken a few decisions, you can boil it down to something that's simpler in code. It doesn't actually represent the whole thing, but it's sort of a subset that's useful. So it can't and shouldn't have all the knowledge either.
Of course, and the most famous technique that we are applying is abstraction, and abstraction is actually shedding off what we think are unimportant details. So we do that, and on one hand we do that, and then we will go and promote something like event sourcing with the argument that you should record everything, nothing should be thrown away because you might need it one day.
Oh yeah. That's very true. I talked to some people who were doing like they were working at data processing consultants basically, and they had caught themselves saying to a customer that most of the data you've already gathered is probably worthless because you need to figure out what you need as well. You can't just capture everything and imagine that, this will be so useful. Just have a whole pile of
Yes, on the other hand, when you think about it, a real goal for every organization should probably be data collected over time. And then everyone is speaking about data-driven decision. By my experience is that almost no one does it. But it sounds so great,
Yeah.
This is one of those things you cannot deny, you cannot speak against it. But when you think about it, at least my experience is, as long as you have at least one Excel sheet populated manually by someone, presented on some meeting, this is clear evidence that your organization is not fully digitalized, because if it were, you would be getting all these reports generated automatically in real time, and you would be able to most probably, hopefully, make some informed decisions based on that.
Oh yeah, yeah. We have some distance left to go. There's still stuff left to do. That's for sure. It's yeah. We do scheduling systems at my day job, and Excel is definitely our biggest competitor for like every part of the system and for the whole as well.
And they say that better part of the financial system of the world is running on top of Excel.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess the only exceptions are the parts that are run by like CSV files or something like that, because that's definitely down there somewhere as well.
Agreed.
I like that we immediately started talking about a completely different thing than the ones we had listed as possible topics. It's I love when that happens.
But after this conversation, we will be able to go to LinkedIn and say like experts in organizational restructuring and digitalization.
Yeah, exactly. We actually solved all of it in just one conversation.
You see.
Yeah, so you work in developer relations now, and you work at Ravendb, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So how did you end up there?
So it's a bit unusual, unorthodox story. I was following this company for years. I liked what they were doing. And then one day I was working at management position back then. It was something like 5 years ago. They approached me and offered, we're producing a database. Would you like a demo? And I replied with the words, you're knocking on the open doors. I'm trying to introduce it here in my organization. And this is how conversation started. And I started cooperating with them, like supporting. And I ended up actually working with them and helping them spread the word and promote this product, which is NoSQL database.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, that's the ideal situation, isn't it? Can we demo this thing that you're really interested in already? It's perfect. And then you start. Did you start there immediately as developer relations, or did you start as some other position?
No, actually, I crafted. As I said, it's a bit unusual story. It's definitely not this, out of the book of advice. I actually crafted my own position over time, because I was first developer, and then in most of the organizations they will take. I would not say that I'm a good developer, that I'm a best, but general sentiment in IT companies is to take good developers and to turn them into bad managers. And then you don't have a good developer anymore, you have a bad manager now.
Yep.
So I was pushed into managerial position, and of course I immediately tried to learn some things and read books, and in the end my position was, you really cannot motivate people. This dream of inspiring leader, I think it's a bit surreal. So my philosophy was to take people, to accept people as they are, get to know them, and then try to craft the best position for them. So to personalize position, so they could enjoy what they do, they could be productive, they could be doing well, and simply speaking, to avoid tasks which are unpleasant for them or they do not like. It's not always possible, but I think good managers should be striving towards that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would be able to write a piece of software to just assign tasks randomly, which would be what most managers are doing.
Oh, yeah. Anyone in the team should be able to take this.
I hope so. Yeah. And then I went and applied the same philosophy from the other side. So I proposed, okay, I'm good at this, and this. Will you let me do that, and that? And I'll try to learn some new things over time. For example, I'm a rather introvert person, and I had to learn all these public speaking, public appearances, arts over time. So I said, okay, I would like to do DevRel, but I'm aware that this is like public relations essentially. So if you're patient enough with me, I will concentrate on producing code samples, producing articles, and And then over time, I will try to train myself, to teach myself to be able to speak publicly without being nervous, to be articulate, to be composed when I have some kind of public appearances.
Yes.
So they were patient enough with me to give me a chance and to let me grow into this position organically. Yeah. There's this saying, you should step out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it is true, but you shouldn't step, across the line and fall into abyss.
Oh, yeah.
You should
absolutely.
First prepare yourself to step out of your comfort zone and then say, okay, do I have any excuses not to go to conference and give this talk? Well, I cannot find any excuses, and it may be unpleasant to me emotionally, but, I cannot find good excuses, rational ones, not to do it, so let me do it.
Yeah. So, someone talked about it like having another extra zone. So like you have the comfort zone, and then you have outside of the comfort zone, I think they called it the challenge zone or something. And then outside of that, you have the danger zone. And that's when you step into the abyss. So you want to try and avoid that one or balance out that one.
I noticed that nowadays people are having short attention spans. So this step out of your comfort zone is not just a single sentence. It's followed by a bit of explanation. But for some reason, people step at this, at first comma or first full stop and do not read beyond that.
Yes.
You know the jack of all trades saying.
Yep.
Well, the full saying goes jack of all trades, master of none.
Yep.
But there's a second line, and I invite everyone listening to this podcast to check what is the second line.
Oh, wow. I need to do that as well. Yeah, it's always worth reading the full context of things.
Agreed. So same goes with the comfort zone. Yes, you should stimulate yourself and motivate yourself to step, but not at all cost.
Mm. And I think it's such a superpower almost to remember that crafting your position is an option. I mean, in one way, it always happens that what a person does and what their position is sort of adapts to each other, but that you can actually do it intentionally, like you did. I can suggest changing my position to be more like this or less like this. I don't think everyone realizes that's actually something you can do, and do in an active way at that.
But even myself, I need to think actively sometimes about this. So, for example, let's say you realize that you're not good at these public coding under stress at the job interview. Mm-hmm. So what to do about it? One philosophy would be to work really hard, going to lead code, etc., etc. But then if you start thinking out of the box, okay, can I avoid this completely? So then you, for example, might go work on a couple of open source projects, expose your code publicly, and build your position to stand in public as a trusted coder. And then hopefully you might avoid this interview path completely.
Yeah. Is there something that appeals to me that I can do instead or do more of to balance out? Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot to think about already. It's awesome. A quick but huge thank you to everyone sponsoring us on Ko-fi. You too can become one of them by surfing to ko-fi.com/KODSNACK Kodsnack, and giving us either a one-time donation or monthly support. If you support us on the coffee drinker level of €5 per month or more, you get a bunch of very nice stickers in your actual physical mailbox. And if you support us on the barista level for €10 per month or more, you also get a thank you right here. Big thanks to Albin Groen, Svante Richter, Anders Legell, Brother Ingo, and Tobbe Lundberg. Everyone who supports us helps make the podcast possible, and the more of you there are, the better we can make the podcast. We do sometimes have sponsors, but it's actually your support which is making it possible to cover our monthly costs And if you want to support us in other ways, you can, of course, give the podcast a review in your podcast player. That also helps a lot. Give it a thumbs up, a star, write a comment, or whatever your player supports. Or, of course, simply tell someone who might like the podcast about an episode. And remember, you're a fantastic person, whether you support us or not. Yeah, so when we started talking about this, we met at Ravendb through a common acquaintance, I guess we should say. And he said, yeah, Dejan, he has so many great stories or great things to talk about. And then I contacted you through LinkedIn and you sent the list. And I was like, yes, I want to hear about everything of this. but to start somewhere, I think the first thing was I like latched onto was database backstories. I think that was what Jimmy was talking about as well from the start when he introduced us.
Yes, correct. So the real question would be, okay, how many databases there are? Like thousands probably.
Yeah.
So the real question is, why would someone want to build one more database?
Yep.
When I'm at these conferences, I'm usually at the booth, and I'm a technical person at the booth doing kind of demonstrations and technical discussions, and people approach me and ask what this is, and I jokingly reply back, or in other words, why do we need one more database?
Yep.
So the backstory of this one is quite interesting. Founder of this company and developer who wrote this database from scratch, he was the first contributor on Hibernate open source project.
Ah, okay.
So by the nature of this way of contribution, he learned a lot about relational databases. And then, of course, natural next step would be, okay, let me use this knowledge. So he started working as a consultant. And one of the topics I proposed to you was the topic of professional depression, as I call it.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
One of the major points in my career was, after 10 plus years, I realized I'm still struggling with the database. I'm still struggling in the sense that, okay, I still write some queries and they are slow and I go back and fight with them. And, you always start from yourself and say, okay, I don't have enough knowledge. I have to go and really learn some things, read some book, watch some courses. It's a natural thing. But, it's a bit depressing that after, 10 or 15 years, you say, okay, well, this moment of proficiency did not arrive yet.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Actually, when you look at it, this is the case in most companies. Lots of people working, developing code are struggling with slow queries, internal details of the database, and this is where space was for consultancy. So Oren went and started doing consultancy. This is a natural step, but what he did not expect is that after a couple of months, I think, he discovered that he's able to arrive at 9 a.m. on Monday, and by the lunchtime on the very same day, he's able to single out 4 or 5 anti-patterns he was able to find in the code. And this is quite interesting because then you realize, okay, going from company to company, you have unique perspective because, most of the developers are working within their own team. But he had this perspective going from company to company and comparing teams, comparing the way they are doing, what mistakes they are making, what things could be optimized. And he figured out same things are happening over and over again. So I'm joking that every good developer is a bit lazy, So what would be first thing when you notice some things are repeating? Let me write the software to automate it.
Yep, solve it once.
This is what he did. He first wrote profilers, which would be analyzing your code and advising you, okay, this is the mistake you have. This is query without index. This is select n plus one. This is where you should optimize. This is where you're creating 60 calls to the database without even being aware, because we are usually not measuring.
Yeah.
So are we in a good place if a simple web page creates like 69, 75 requests to the database to render simple content? Probably not.
No.
So
Possibly.
after he created these profilers for for various databases, various systems, this little bug in head of every good developer continues to work.
Yep.
So the next step is in this line of thinking, okay, how this could be prevented, not diagnosed. And you could pull the same parallel with quality check and quality control. Or quality assurance. Most organizations nowadays are having these quality checkers in their organizations, or as we would call them, testers.
Yep.
So you develop a piece of software, you develop functionality, you hand it over. It's like a pipeline or like a factory, software factory. So you do your part of the job, you hand it over to the next phase, they will do the testing. If they discover defects, they will get it back to you. So what they are doing, they are detecting defects or bugs. So actual next step would be quality assurance, where quality would be part of philosophy and it will be embedded in every step of the process. But unfortunately, most of the organizations are still working in the pipeline kind of thinking. Okay, we will have gatekeepers who will make sure that products with defects are not shipped. So here comes the same kind of thinking. How can we prevent all these anti-patterns, all these problems? And being inspired by Couchbase, he started working in the evenings on his own implementation of a database. And we must put this in context. This is 2009.
Yeah.
The very dawn of NoSQL.
Yeah.
And this is how this database was born. I'm joking with him that this is frustration-driven development, FDD.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense to me. I mean, I have a friend who he really wants to build games, but he usually ends up implementing his own language first. And I feel like this is a version of the same thing. I would like to solve these issues with slow queries. Better start with the database. Gotta go back to the source and do it properly.
Yes, and then as part of this is rather opinionated database. Because, it's product of a design approach. But of course, when I say design, I mean approach to creating things that would work in a certain way. So, for example, in first versions, and this is something that was abandoned, but in the first versions, by default, if you attempt to fetch more than 128 items from the database, you would get exception. And you could
that's opinionated.
Yes, you could turn it off. Over time, people were complaining about it, so we decided to remove it. But you see the origins of the approach, because usually you don't need more than 50 or 80 items. This is what you can show on the screen. Yeah. So philosophy behind this is, okay, let us prevent accidental queries that would fetch 10,000 items from the database.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to do. If it's possible, it's so easy to do. I'll just fetch all of these. That's the most straightforward thing. And then suddenly all of these means 25,000 things because someone has more of that than you expected.
Or even more unpleasant situation is that lots of code that we are writing are dependent on the content of the database.
Yeah.
I can say, okay, give me all the employees from UK. But then this will contextually mean, okay, if organization is small, that this can be 10 or this can be 10,000. And at the time of writing, you might not be extrapolating this far. And we also already mentioned applications can be, 15 or 20 years old. So they must sustain changes in the shape or type or the amount of data. Yeah. Or as I start joking with it, let's say your business is blooming, you're really doing good, and your database is slow. So I'm labeling this as you shouldn't be punished for being successful. Because if you're successful, you'll have lots of employees, lots of orders. So your database or your application should be punishing you for being successful. So there's lots of opinionated approaches. Like one of them is queries without indexes are forbidden. But then to make up for that, database is able to automate things that you would do manually. So for example, what you would do manually, you would first write query, you would go and analyze it, on which fields you're sorting or filtering, and then you would go in the second step and create an index over these fields. So on one hand, Ravendb is prohibiting execution of queries without indexes because this is what is producing full table scans. On the other hand, Ravendb is doing what you would do manually. It's analyzing queries and creating indexes automatically. So there's some kind of balance between opinionated approach to prevent things and then not to make your life harder.
Yeah, so we have a strong opinion and we solve it for you, sort of.
Yeah, so this is fine line you walk in on when you're creating a product. You try to prevent some things and then to make life easier. If you make a door that no one can lock off, you have perfect security, but it's completely unusable.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's always the balance between usability and either security or performance.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes like avoiding and ending up at too narrow of a use case, I guess, as well. Like you can have a really strong opinion about something, but it locks out a bit too many use cases or something like that.
Absolutely, especially if you're building general purpose database like this one is.
Yeah. So what other interesting opinionated decisions are in there?
So there's a constant feedback loop, which I like, listening to community. In most, there's a challenge. You build something, some kind of a product, then you build business around it. And the way you're running business is even more important than the way you're developing product. Because you run into jeopardy of building large bureaucracy, large infrastructure within your organization. When something like this happens, you can end up with market and driven development where you have two features, and one of these features is essential to your users, which are developers, which again are a very special group, and we can also talk about it. Yeah. And then you have something that's very marketable, especially nowadays with, blockchain or AI or what, insert here any type of hype lately. So maintaining this cultural thing, when you speak to actual users, listen to them and build your roadmap based on that is very important, I think. Yeah. So to keep your original spirit, your original culture, to shield it as your business is growing around it. That's a real of a challenge, especially when you start thinking about all these founders, which are praised. But if you look at the typical engineer starting something for the first time in his or her life, this person is building a company. And at every step along that way, this person is leading and organizing largest company in his or her life so far. So you're running 5 people company. This is biggest organization, biggest enterprise, so to speak, so far in your life. You grew to 15. Okay, this is now the biggest one, and you have literally zero experience with running any size company.
Yeah.
So actually surviving and not to become like some big corporations, I will not name them now, but we can all recognize how they are becoming, I wouldn't say evil over time, but self-centric and obsessed with profit in short term. So I think maintaining these original goals and shielding them is special for us. So I really do respect people who are able to do something like that.
Yeah, it's incredibly tough. And I guess the solutions must be pretty unique for each instance as well, because it depends so much on what happens along the way.
I agree. When you look at industries, and so imagine some kind of physical product. You need to produce it and ship it. And if you're doing small batches, it will be manual work. But then as you grow big, you essentially end up producing specialized assembly line for this product. Yeah. And I think the same thing remains in virtual space as we are building software companies. We're not operating physical things anymore, but every single organization is unique. Company culture, what people you're working with, in what space you're operating. So this illusion that you can collect best practices and just apply them, I think it's just an illusion. Same goes as I'm very opinionated about Scrum or Agile approaches. So, for example, when you look at the Scrum as, let's say, proposed Agile methodology, if you look back in past year, are you doing Scrum every single sprint the same way?
Yeah.
If you're doing so, this means that you're not adapting. The methodology itself is not Agile.
Yeah, nothing is happening.
So to me, it's a very bad thing personally. So if we are doing same things over and over again, not analyzing, not adapting, we are very petrified in essence of the things, even though we might claim that we are Agile. So exactly. I completely agree with you that every single organization is unique as people working there, and you should be observing over time and correcting things and adjusting and evolving with the organization as it grows.
Yeah. I think I feel like there's something there that should be possible to talk about more, because we like to talk about adapting to change and stuff, and we like to talk about processes for things, but people don't talk that much about stopping stuff, like no longer doing something that was useful before but isn't anymore. People talk about let's add testing, or let's do this or that in this particular way, but nobody talks about that thing we did for 6 weeks that really helped, and then we didn't need it anymore, then we did something else. I feel like people are doing that, but they're not really talking about it, and that would probably be helpful as well. Because some people are like to hold on to that thing. It's like, now we're doing this, we're doing it right, let's continue the same way.
Look, there's a saying that each organization is a mechanism optimized for maintaining status quo.
Oh yeah.
So when you think about it, everyone will claim, or they would like to claim, they're innovative. They're producing some kind of innovation. But then when you think about the essence of the innovation, is essentially comes down to tolerance to failure, because you will have lots of ideas within the organization. So first thing is listening to everyone. This is essentially Toyota's way approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you listen to everyone, you try out new ideas in a controlled manner. Most of these ideas will be failures. But you must have company culture to tolerate these failures, to keep on trying, and sooner or later you will run into something that's really innovative, really beneficial, and then you will succeed. So don't tell me you're innovative, tell me how many things you tried and failed, and you sustained this and continued with the same approach. That would be one thing. The second thing is I personally think that innovation is equally about doing new things and also not doing what everyone else does.
Oh, yes. Makes sense. Because, it's not unique to us. It's not for us in a way either. I guess take the ideas, but not the whole. Yeah, I feel like many stories about, we did this process and it did so much for us. And I suspect that in many cases the real success was that like Alice and Bob were in the same team and were talking directly to each other. It's not what process they used. It's you had the right people in the right combination.
Yes, and thinking about everything, being aware of everything. For example, I have a friend who's working in a bank. She's leading development team. And I talked to her a couple of weeks ago and she told me we have a product owner. Okay, So when you go back and read into theory of Scrum, whatever you want to call it, a product owner is a replacement for actual future user of your product. So if you don't have access to people, to let's call them domain experts, users of your product, you will introduce role of product owner who will, pretend to be a future user, and this product owner will be able to answer your questions on behalf of actual users. But in this specific case, she's working in a bank and she's leading a team that is writing software for the employees of the bank. So do they really need product owner? Well, maybe, I don't know what's internal hierarchy or structure, or who can have access to which floor, whatever. Yeah. But I have a feeling that they did not give a proper, dose of thinking about this. Do we really need intermediary party between developer and actual user?
Yeah, it's possible to find the users. They're in the same building.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. It's someone put up these are the rules of the game. This is how it works. Yeah, I feel like Scrum is strange, because when I read the Scrum guide, it feels like someone has become sort of obsessed with writing game rules or something. It's like, let's take this set of rules and make them sort of purer and purer, and then they washed away all the context. So it's like, these are words that don't make sense without a world around them. And yeah, what do you actually have here?
It should be contextualized. It should be you should, I think, take it as more like inspiration, and see what could be applied or adopted or modified or bended to the actual team or organization you're working in. Because, in ideal case, most mature employees will be what's called manager of one. So if you have really mature, conscious developer, for example, this person will arrive at Monday morning, and this person will either take something what's most urgent to work on, or if there's nothing, this person will either find something or will go and talk to someone. So you will not have this case of someone arriving on Monday morning, looking at a proverbial Jira and not finding anything there, and then sitting and waiting, in blissful peace for something to come along the way. This is in ideal case. So if you have team of managers of one, maybe you don't need daily stand-up meeting. Maybe you need, a weekly stand-up meeting, or maybe you will, maybe you will have this need to closely monitor someone. In my career, I have been leading various teams. So on a couple of occasions, I had people who were very insecure. They were carrying over, psychological scars from previous workplaces, and they were feeling insecure. So they get tasked with something, and they are sitting there. They don't know how to proceed. They're stuck, but at the same time, they're feeling unpleasant, insecure, asking for help. And, if you're not aware of this possibility, you will simply think, okay, this person is autonomous completely, this person is working, and they will reach back to me when they have a problem or when they are over. This, again, I'm going back to what I think is the essence of being a good manager, adapting your approach, personalize your approach to every single member of your team, and, accepting people as they are. And I don't think there's much more you can do.
No. Adapt things. Build on your strength. Make your own secret sauce for whichever group of people you happen to be, I guess.
I agree.
Yeah. I almost started talking about some internal team stuff, but I don't think that's probably for me and my team to talk about instead. That's much more useful.
But seems both you and I are old enough to carry some scars, and you can see that we are. Every time we start talking about software development, we somehow slide into discussing organizations and teams.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. There's code is such a small part of it. I want to be better at that part as well, but but there's a lot of other stuff going on as well.
By the way, you mentioned your friend who's working in gaming industry, if I remember correctly, and ends up writing his own languages.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday I discovered there's a language called Unison,
mm-hmm.
and this is very innovative language. So actually what happened is that team behind this language managed to find investors, and I think they ended up collecting over $9 million in venture capitalist funding to develop this new language and whole ecosystem around it.
Wow.
So this is not science fiction, this is reality, and I was so mesmerized when I discovered that story yesterday.
Wow. How does that work? And I wonder what the venture capitalists expect to get out of supporting a language.
Well, actually, the idea is that programming for cloud should be, I wouldn't say more seamless, but the tools we are using should be more adapted to the modern infrastructure that we run our code on.
Okay.
Because when you look at it, there was this magazine that's now discontinued called Dr. Dobbs Journal. I don't know if you ever heard about it or read it.
Yeah, I've heard. I think I read an article or two. Someone I knew had a subscription way back when.
It was a great magazine. In 2005, they had a famous article entitled "The Free Lunch is Over."
Oh, yeah.
And if you remember that one. So just for your audience, there's this Moore law that speaks about increase in number of transistors in CPU. And it says that every 18 months, number of transistors is doubling. So up until 2005, we had something that could be characterized as a free lunch, because frequency of the CPU was increasing over time, and then in order to make your software work faster, to be more performant, to have less latency, you just go and swap different hardware. So you upgrade from 386 to 486 Intel, and all of a sudden your application is working, I don't know what, 25% faster.
Yeah.
So this free lunch stopped in 2005, so we will mark 20th anniversary next year. Yep. Number of transistors continue to grow, but we don't have anything over 3.5 gigahertz, I think.
Yeah.
What we now have is multi-core CPUs, and when you start thinking about it, we are not good at using all these cores in parallel.
No, that's true. That's true.
So the free lunch is over. We should start thinking actively about this. And the sad part, at least sad from my perspective, is that in past 20 years, we actually did not develop, or let me be strictly precise, we did not popularize approaches which are enabling us to easily, seamlessly produce applications which are using all these cores.
Yeah, that's very true. There were a few steps, like make it a little bit easier here and there, and then, there's so many gotchas everywhere. It's probably easier if I just keep it on the main thread.
So one of those moments when I got, professional depression was the moment when I went to vacation, and usually I'm the opposite of these people that are bringing some light literature to vacation. I bring the heaviest book I can find, because I have finally enough time and I can relax and read something really engaging. So I was reading concurrency.net. And, after 25 pages, I concluded, two things. I don't know almost anything about concurrency. I'm realizing that, and concurrency is hard. And the second thing is our industry is not producing software that is, adapted to concurrent execution.
Yep.
So when you start reading about it, when you start thinking, we are using shared memory, multi-threading software is executing, but the memory is shared. Threads can change things, or conceptually you can pass some data structure somewhere, object. You're passing a reference, and this is piece of memory that anyone you pass on reference to can change. So things are not so not so bright.
Yeah, but I guess. Or is it improving now, or is it still?
Look, personally, when I do my personal projects, I'm now I slided a couple of years ago into area of functional programming languages and immutable data structures, and all these good things. I would dare to call them. I would dare to call them good things, but I'm not seeing these good things penetrating into general developer population, and this is quite puzzling for me, because I think that things that are present in functional programming are good. So you have pure functions, you have determinism, you have a read-only data structure, which is immediately giving you thread safety. You have more predictability, and for some reason this is not spreading into industry. So I think there's some kind of 20 or 30 years or even larger period of time between something being discovered and verified in academia and then spreading over to industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I hear lots of people talk about functional programming and picking up ideas and being inspired. But like you say, it doesn't quite make it all the way out into production or something like that.
Yes, and let me give you one very interesting example. So we all heard about SOLID acronym.
Yep.
And letter L stands for Liskov substitution principle. Yep. So, or LSP. So LSP states that if you have a class and if you inherit it, everywhere you have object of the superclass appearing, you should be able to take object of the subclass, replace it, and everything will be working.
Yeah.
But then when you start reading this paper, so if anyone went and took this actual paper by Barbara Liskov and Janet Wang, you'll discover that in order to guarantee this behavioral subtyping, as it is called, you need mechanisms of invariant checking, which are not present in almost none of popular object-oriented languages. So everyone will tell you composition over inheritance, and they will keep on repeating it without actually diving into the essence. And the essence is very simple. Inheritance is not subtyping. So in object-oriented languages of C++, Line, and Java, and C# and all these languages, you want to create types and you want to create subtypes. And subtyping mechanism in most major mainstream object-oriented languages is actually inheritance. But when you do inheritance, you don't have any guarantees that objects of inherited class will behave properly in the sense that they will be able to replace superclass objects.
Yeah, so we're talking as if we have this property, but we never check it or never do anything to try and enforce it.
So, for example, SOLID is a set of principles, but SOLID is not a set of rules or recipes that will help you reach these principles. So essentially, the way I'm reading letter L in SOLID is, you shall not inherit. Do not use inheritance in your software.
Yeah, that's where we land.
Yes, but for some reason, no one is across the internet is reading it the same way I do. So maybe we can open discussion in future episodes. Maybe you can talk with your guests about, is anyone else but me reading LSP the same way?
I think it's one of those things, again, about not reading after the first period in the paragraph, because it's funny. I have there's another Swedish podcast that have gone through like basic-ish concepts in software development a few times, and they talked about SOLID once, and I think the L was where stuff got a little bit blurry, and I guess it's something like this, and I think that's where most people stop. It's like, I guess it's something like this, and then you don't dig into it, and then you don't find that thing, then we don't realize that we're not actually doing what we think we're doing.
So I would like to see when you, for example, you started this conversation with the LinkedIn where we connected. I see lots of recurring content being repeated on the LinkedIn, but I would like to really see more. I have 2 or 3 people I'm following who are really digging deep into it, not being led by this marketing or promotion urge, but really thinking things through, writing them down. So I think the art of reading is a bit neglected nowadays. Or maybe I should go and say, okay, these younger people, But I can see there's this general trend of people, watching videos and using them for learning. And I have nothing against it, except for the fact that reading books is still a thing. And this way of, reading something, digesting, going back to it. I still can remember a couple of blog posts that I keep on returning every couple of years.
Yeah.
One of them is Rob Connery. Do you really need repository? No, it goes, do you need repository around unit of work? And I was reading this over and over again. And every time I read it, I realize different angle and I advance a bit. So I think this should be more promoted, like really substantial content. And I would like to see, and I started this conversation with mathematics, I wish like to see software development becoming at least a little bit more like mathematics. Because in mathematics, you have this axiomatic approach where you have some facts, and then you're building consequences of these upon these facts, theorems and lemmas, and then you build upon work of other people, but you don't go back and discuss things. Somehow in mathematics, topics are closed in some way. There's general consensus, factual based one, deductive techniques, and then we are advancing. So for example, if I go and ask you, is test-driven development resulting in better design of a software, you'll have very polarizing discussion between people.
Oh yes.
TDD proponents will say, okay, TDD is leading you naturally towards good design. Other people will argue against that. But the really sad part is we don't have means of factually checking it. So every such discussion is opinionated, and I'm stating my opinion and you're stating, but I'm really hoping for some means of really finding a way to verify it. And, agree over it and proceed with new ideas that we should discuss instead of returning back to something like TDD.
Yeah, methods of moving forward rather than just digging.
Yes, and when you look at it, when you look at mathematics, in elementary school, you will approach something like, 600 or 700 years. In high school, you will approach, 19th century maybe, or 18th. In university, you will approach, you will reach 100 years ago. And then if you go to doctoral PhD studies, you will advance to, past 50 years. Because the body of knowledge is so vast. So probably something like that is already happening in computer science or programming. If you look just at the things invented in past, let's say, 30 years, it's substantial amount of knowledge that young developers out of the university need to crunch first in order to be able to comprehend some things.
Yeah. Yeah. Or we think we need to crunch it all because we can't tell it apart either.
Or we can, you could go even one step further and say, okay, maybe we are unable to divide current trends from basic propositions. So if you, for example, if you go and look at something like React is very popular, but if you go and dig into the essence, you will see that this is MVU pattern, and it was invented with Elm. And most people never heard of Elm.
Yeah.
But what I think is important is, to bring yourself up to the level that you're able to recognize patterns, and you go and say, okay, this is new thing, some new React, okay, I'm recognizing patterns here, and this is good or bad, or I'll make my decision based on the substance, not the hype.
Yeah. Yeah. it feels like once you started picking up enough concepts, then it doesn't seem like everything is so new anymore either. It's like, this is a variant of this, and this is this idea applied to this thing. That's interesting, but it's not world-shattering, and I don't need to read everything about it right now.
Agreed.
I can figure it out when I need it, if it becomes current for me. Yeah, I guess that was a very short hour.
Indeed.
Yeah, it was super interesting. I think I would really like to do more episodes going forward.
I agree with that as well.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Dejan, for coming on for the first time and not the last one.
Thank you for having me, and I hope this is also interesting, not just to you and me, but to a wider audience.
Yeah, I know it. All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Tack för att just du lyssnar på Kodsnack. Om du vill stödja oss, varför inte tipsa en bekant om podden? Eller lämna en recension i till exempel iTunes eller något annat ställe där det går att sätta betyg på poddar. Du kan också stödja oss genom att köpa oss en kopp kaffe på Coffee. ko-fi.com/kodsnack. Alla pengar går direkt till att göra podden bättre och trevligare. Du kan också komma och hänga i vår Slack-kanal. Länk finns på kodsnack.se, precis som alla andra länkar och all annan info kopplat till varje avsnitt. Sist men inte minst finns det också en länk till vår Spreadshop-butik där du kan köpa tröjor och andra prylar med kodsnacktryck. Återigen, tusen tack för att du lyssnar. Vi hörs.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.